Hello, coders. Today we're going to look at integrating Tailwind in with Visual Studio and Blazor. It's really not too hard once you have it set up, but the default templates come with Bootstrap, which of course has been around for years, a very good workhorse. But if you happen to want to use Tailwind, you're going to have to do a little bit of setup. So I am going to run through that process. Now, having just agonized my way through it, I say agonized because am a newbie to Tailwind, don't get me wrong. It didn't drop in as easily as Bootstrap, but that's only because there's more going on with Tailwind. Whereas Bootstrap is just a library, you drop it in and you start writing your classes and code. Tailwind is more of an interactive tool. It has a build process. And so you get a lot of benefits from that. And not to cover that here, but just to point out that there is that build process as part of it. So that needs to be set up. So we're going to create a new project here, and we're going to use the Blazor web app template. So this is .NET 8. So you need to have the .NET 8 SDK installed on your machine to see Blazor web app. Otherwise, you're going to see Blazor Server app, and then typically there's another one called the Blazor, I think it's the WASM, app. And you could actually do the same thing, but just for this particular example, we're just going to use the .NET 8, and let's get started. And boom, boom, we've created it. Let's run it. Make sure everything's set up and running here. And there we have it, our wonderful loading, weather, our counter, click me. So everything's working. All right, so now, first thing we're going to do is go to our pages. Up here under components, this is the client. That's like a WASM version of it. We're not going to do anything with that. We're just up here under pages, and we're going to go to the home page. All right, and as you can see, this is our code. And now I'm going to go over to the Tailwind website, and I'm going to grab a little sample code here. And drop it in. I'm going to drop this in twice. And then I'm going to wrap this bottom div in a another div. And I'm going to add a class here called dark. And so that is going to give us dark mode for this down here. Whereas this up here is going to be in light mode. And so the whole point of that is just to show that, okay, we've got everything working, dark mode, light mode, and everything else. So we save that, and then let's run it again just to see what it looks like. And obviously this is going to be broken, but that's the whole idea. Then we will get it fixed up. You see, so here we are. Clearly that's not a happening thing. Something's definitely going on with that. All right, so now let's get this going here. All right, so step one is there is an extension for Tailwind. Extension, manage extensions. Here we go. I'm going to install because I already installed it. But if you don't have it, it's this Tailwind CSS VS22 editor support by Theron Wang. And yeah, so you install it, and then you need to close Visual Studio, open it back up again, and just make sure this is now installed and working. So after you do that, if you want to ensure that everything went okay, come over here to Options, and then look down here under Tailwind, CSS, and IntelliSense. And now you can see we've got some options. So no need to change any of these options. It just to make sure, like, okay, yeah, it got set up. All right, so that's step one, installing the extension. And so now we come over here to step two, is that we have to enable Tailwind for this particular project. You have to do it on a project by project basis. It's not, okay, well, now it applies to everything, right? And so we come over here, we right click on the project, and we come down here and say set up Tailwind CSS. So we click that, and it's going to do a little work for us. And so we'll just wait a moment for a couple of files to be created, and then we will take a look at those files. So now, as you can see, it just added this Tailwind extension.json, right? And this is just a little JSON file that keeps some information that this extension needs, right? So the first thing it needs to know is, where is the configuration file? Well, it's right here, right? And that was created for us and dropped in there. Now, this is not sufficient because notice it has nothing here in this content. So if we tried to use it as is, it would do nothing for us. So we're now going to go over and drop in the default for that. And so I'm going to do a search over here on this other screen and call it, let's see, Tailwind content configuration. And I'm going to go there, right here, content configuration, right? And HTML. So that's not really what we want. That's for a pure HTML. Let's see, we want one for Visual Studio. So I'm going to go get this one that I already have. It's from another project. It's from this one right here. And this one is meant for Visual Studio. It's loading up here. Come over here to our configuration. And we have this right here. All right, now I should note that, let's go back here to this extension to installed. Here's a better place. So here we have Tailwind, and then let's go to the guide. And this guide will step you through pretty much exactly what I'm stepping you through now. And if you look through here, see, we just did this step right here, set up Tailwind. This is where you need to add this right here. Okay, so we copied that, we come back over here, and then you see we already have it dropped in, but it's the same thing. So since we're doing Blazor, we have Razor files. You see our pagers are .razor, so that set up everything. All right, and then also notice that we have this dark mode equals class. I'm going to close this other project so it'll get mixed up here. Don't save. All right, you see we didn't really save. So, but first let's drop in that dark mode equals class. I'll explain more about that in a moment. And then I'm going back to my editor support right here to this. Again, copy. And we're going to drop that in there. All right, so while we're here, let's just talk about this dark mode. There's two mode class, which means a class is going to be your flag to turn it on and off, which is what we used here, right? It's just like, okay, just give me the dark mode, right? But you could also put media right here, and then it uses media queries, and it's getting it from the operating system or browser as to what mode the user prefers. So, but for this example, we're going to leave it with class. All right, so we're saving that. All right, so now we're going to close this. We're going to close this. So now we have our Tailwind config set up, but our input CSS file is not set up. You see, right now it says null. All right, so we need to decide, okay, where's our input file? So an input file is a pretty standard file for Tailwind, and it just gives us some configuration information. So we're going to add a new item, and it is a CSS class. Here we go, a style sheet, and we're going to call this input. How about Tailwind input CSS? So we're going to add that. All right, and then again, we're going to go back here to our setup. Let me close some of this other stuff I got going on here. All right, and now we had, here we go. I'm going to close these other ones. I got too much going on here. All right, and so now we've set this, but we have to add this right here. Make sure you include the base, components, and utilities, and that's pretty much standard fare for all Tailwind configurations. So it's nothing really special, so we're going to wipe that out. And those are called directives, in case you were wondering, and you can look up more on what the Tailwind directives are. But one thing to note is that even though it says Tailwind is not a known directive, it's okay. There's no way of telling IntelliSense, okay, just ignore that. But no big deal. It's just sitting there in Tailwind input. All right, and so now we need an output file. So as I was mentioning earlier, there's a build process, and Tailwind will build exactly what you need for your CSS file and drop it in. And so it needs a place to put that. So now we're going to come over here and we're going to add another item. Again, a style sheet, and I'm going to call this app-tailwind. Now, I like to put that app in front of it just so that it's clear to me that it's my file being used and not just a generic Tailwind CSS file. But that's just me. All right, so, and right now, there's nothing in it. Imagine that. All right, so I'm going to say, okay, save. All right, so now we've got everything basically set up that we need. As you can see now, but now we have to tell this extension where these two files are. Now, you could just type them in there, but easier to come over here, right-click, and say, set as Tailwind CSS build file. That's the same thing as saying set as Tailwind CSS input file. So we set that there, and then we say this, we right click again and say set as Tailwind CSS output file. All right, so then if we come back over here and look at this, you can see that it's been duly noted, right? So now we have everything set up. And if we close out of all of these and come over to build, we now have this new menu item here called Start Tailwind CSS Build Process. All right, so we're going to switch over here to our build window and clear this, and then we're going to come over here and build it. Now we're just doing this by hand, you know, but it actually has a file watcher, so it'll automatically build for you as you're going along. But for this example, we're just going to start it. Now notice it says build started and build succeeded, right? So we come over here and magic, we have Tailwind CSS set up for us. And it put quite a bit of CSS in here. But we're going to go down to the bottom and look for our custom CSS. And as you can see, it found our dark. And notice that it's using is. Okay, so it says, okay, is this surrounded by a div with the class of dark? And if so, make it this background color. All right, so now let's run it. And are we going to see our CSS classes in action? No. We're just going to see the same old thing because we haven't actually added our CSS to the project, or in our app file so that it actually shows. So now we come over here and we're going to put this after Bootstrap. So notice Bootstrap is in here right now, right? And we'll come back to that in a minute because it's not such a good thing to have Bootstrap and Tailwind going at the same time. There's really no good reason for that except if you have like a legacy app that uses a lot of Bootstrap and you don't want to reconfigure that for Tailwind because that would be a lot of work. But in any case, we're now going to take our app Tailwind and come over here and drop it in. Now, Visual Studio does not correctly put the path for Blazor, right? So Blazor doesn't use this little tilde, so that's completely useless. So if you look at these other ones, there's no tilde and there's not even a base, right? So just modify that so it looks like this. And now we're going to see some Tailwind action if we fire it up. And here we are, and we get our first Tailwind action going on. So clearly it found Tailwind, it's doing some stuff, but we didn't get a dark mode here, right? And so, okay, oopsie, what's the problem with our dark mode? Well, there's some conflicts between Bootstrap and Tailwind. So we're just going to come over here and say, okay, forget Bootstrap, we're going to move on. And we're going to save it. And we're going to come back over here to our file. Now notice our just-in-time compiler just kicked in and it did a build succeeded. All right, so that's good. So in other words, we didn't have to come over here and notice that this just-in-time compiler, is still running. You could click that to stop it if you wanted to, but no reason not to let it run. All right, and then we come back over here, and what do you know? We didn't have to refresh or anything else, and we have dark mode working. And this obviously needs some more styling because we took away all the Bootstrap styling, but it's not too bad. All right, so I hope that was useful. It shows that Tailwind does work, and love that extension. It would be much more difficult to work with Tailwind without it. So thank you to that developer, Theron, I think his name was. All right. Hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.